One issue that comes up regularly in CBT and DAS bike training is where should a rider look when moving through a roundabout. Setting up the approach, they have their OSM-PSL process, and we have a full video on this linked to above. In this video, we're going to look at well-timed and effective continued observations when moving through a variety of roundabouts. The root cause of riders having problems with this is because they have been mistakenly taught or understood that a lifesaver is always a check into the blind spot of the direction we are moving into. Moving to the left in your lane, check the left blind spot and vice versa. But this is not completely correct. At roundabouts, we need to think about where danger or risks of other traffic could come from and assess with an appropriate observation. First, let's look at a classic four-way roundabout with a single lane on the approach. We're going to turn left exit 1. We won't focus on the OSM-PSL approach process in detail here, rather what happens once we are deciding it is safe to enter and progressing through the roundabout. For left exit 1, once we've set up the approach correctly and determined it's safe to move on to the roundabout, we can usually concentrate on our eyes taking us where we intend to go. But in this next example of left exit 1, it's a bit more complex. The approach sign shows us we have a feeder lane such that we shouldn't have to give way to traffic from the right. However, notice how the rider makes a deliberate check to the right even though he is moving to the left. This check is for anyone chopping incorrectly into his lane off the roundabout, and we can speak from experience of this scenario being a possibility. After hanging back from the vehicle in lane 2 so that he's not in his blind spot and it will soon be merging, there is another right life save in preparation for that merge down from 2 to 1 lane. This time, back to our classic four-way roundabout and right exit 3 this time. The approach is set up using OSM-PSL, but notice how the rider also checks the other exits on his approach, so he is aware of incoming traffic and whether it will be stopping to give way to him. After entering and proceeding round the roundabout, there comes the classic left life save and left signal to determine if it is safe to exit the roundabout or take some evasive action such as continuing around. Now let's look at the straight ahead exit 2 at the same roundabout. It's usually the straight aheads that reveals whether a student is following a process by rote rather than thinking through the requirements of the specific roundabout layout that they're at. Once again, on the approach, we have the all-round assessment of traffic at the roundabout, not just being target fixated to the right. For our exit, we have the left signal and the student uses a left lifesaver. At this roundabout, you could consider that it's so narrow and he is dominating the lane that the only real observation required moving through the roundabout is to be aware of any incoming traffic from exit 1 on his left, and that a blind spot check not really necessary in this particular example. But we use this clip to illustrate that most students will follow this so-called rule when they should be thinking a bit more. So let's look at this example. Once again, straight ahead exit 2 at a four-way roundabout, single lane on the approach, so the student's dominating in position 2 in the lane. He checks clearly that it's safe from the right to enter the roundabout, but then rides at a speed that allows him to continue with further checks. The first is monitoring any incoming traffic from left exit 1 that might pull out in front of him, but the next is a right lifesaver for anybody in the big space on his right that could be trying to overtake. So in this situation, it is a right lifesaver that is most critical. However, at the very next roundabout on this stretch of road, it requires a different approach. The lane markings clearly show that for straight ahead exit 2, you should be in lane 2 on the right, with lane 1 being only for traffic taking left exit 1. The student sets the approach up correctly with no indicator, as that could mislead other road users to think that he's going around the roundabout. But for the exit, he gives a left lifesaver, as now the large empty space is on his left and could be occupied by someone also going straight ahead from the incorrect lane. In this very similar example, notice the left lifesaver immediately after determining it's safe to enter the roundabout, due to the lane on his left and the fact that the bike has to turn significantly to the left on the entry. The main risk here is someone going right exit 2 incorrectly from lane 1, and it happens at this roundabout. Next roundabout, the rider's intending to go straight ahead exit 3, and the roundabout sign shows 2 other exits that he has to go past, the first being completely parallel to his own entry. So on the approach, he is monitoring traffic from the right and those exits on his left. These become the critical lifesavers, even though they are not technically into his blind spot. In our last example, we're looking at a rider turning right exit 3 at a far more complex multi-lane roundabout to illustrate how much we need to be aware of other traffic around us. Regardless of the presence of the roadworks, he needs to follow the signage and lane markings to get into lane 3 on the approach. This is a two-stage process at this specific roundabout, hence the use of 2 right lifesavers when moving lanes, with a right indicator of course. He then moves through, following and dominating his lane to the next set of lights. Notice the sign on the right showing that the lane for his exit will move him out to lane 1. When the lights turn red amber, he checks both blind spots, particularly for any other filtering bikes. And as we progress to the next phase of the roundabout, we have 2 vulnerabilities. The first is traffic chopping into our lane in our left blind spot. And again, we can speak from experience at this roundabout where cars in lane on our left go early for an overtake onto the dual carriageway straight ahead. So this warrants a left lifesaver. The next vulnerability could be traffic in the blind spot to our right trying to move into our lane, hence the right lifesaver. As we move into the final phase of the roundabout, we're aware of anyone coming in from the left, even though it's traffic light controlled. And again, our right blind spot for traffic moving from lane 2 to 1 too early. It's very common for that to happen at multi-lane roundabouts. So the final comment here is that you must assess each roundabout individually for appropriate observations. And if you progress through roundabouts at a safe, consistent speed, you will give yourself time to make these checks along with possibly changing your indicators. The entry point to a roundabout is not the place where you start to accelerate significantly. You will not be able to take evasive action if required and not have time for adequate observations throughout the roundabout. We hope you found this video useful. Press like and subscribe to get notified of other videos as we post them onto our channel. If you're considering learning to ride, check out the links below to our website, and safe riding.